Hello everyone and welcome to yet another Wyckoff Theory video. Now, today what we're going to talk about is phases, okay? The phases of Wyckoff Theory. So, previously on the last few classes we talked about, the events in Wyckoff Theory. So, we talked about the preliminary stop, climax, reactions, tests, shaking out, breakout, and confirmation, okay? But all of these events, they appear into specific phases with specific, reasonings behind them in Wyckoff Theory, okay? So the core thing that I want people to get about Wyckoff Theory is that it tries to understand why the markets move in the way that they do, okay? And so uh, just seeing this as a mere price pattern thing, like those candlestick patterns courses that you see everywhere when you search for technical analysis or whatnot, you know this is not what Wyckoff theory is about, at least not in my opinion. Okay, Wyckoff theory to me is trying to think about why the market moves, how it moves, and how we can take a little bit of an advantage from it. Okay, so uh, again, we have five phases here in the Wyckoff theory. So we have the phase A, in which we stop the trend, phase B, in which we build a cause, phase C, in which we do some testing, phase D, in which we start a trend, an uptrend or a downtrend within the range that was formed during phases A and B, and phase E, which is when we break out of the range. Okay? Again, so we do have many different phases, and every one of them are campaigns with specific purposes, right? So let's talk about phase A, which is stopping the previous trend. Okay, so when we stop the previous trend, as we talked about in the last classes, there are four main events. So we have the preliminary support, selling climax, automatic rally, secondary test. Okay, so these are the four events of a phase A, in this case of an accumulation phase A. Okay, if we look at this beautiful little drawing here made by Ryan, from our complication, he just shows us this symmetricality between an accumulation and a distribution in the Wyckoff theory, and we can see that the events have little bits of different names, but the basic structure is the same. All right. Okay. So what the trend is basically the control of buyers and sellers. Of course, in the real world, there is a lot more to talk about, right? It's not just buyers in control and sellers in control, but in this specific context, it is useful to think about it like that, just for the purpose of simplification. Okay, it helps us understand. It's not actually very accurate, but still it helps us understand why the market is moving in a certain way. Okay, so when sellers are in control in this case, it's basically when we are trending down, like here for example, and buyers are in control when we are trending up, like here for example. Okay. Okay, so we have the preliminary support, the preliminary stop, right? It has a peak volume and it alerts us that something might be happening. Okay, so when we see, the price having these big volume moments, that does tell us that a lot of positions are being closed. Like here, for example, we see a really good example of a preliminary stop here, for example, when we see a lot of volume in the middle of an uptrend. That, just sends us a little bit of some flashing signs that a lot of people are selling, a lot of people are closing their positions. And the same goes for, a downtrend. Okay. When you see a big volume in a downtrend, that should, just make us pay a little bit more attention to the trend. Next, we have a climax, which is, in the context of an uptrend, the climax is the moment where everyone is really, excited and really euphoric about the market conditions. So it's most likely, near a bull market top, right? And in an accumulation pattern, the selling climax is usually the moment of the highest despair. Everyone is thinking that Bitcoin, for example, is going to go to zero and that it's all a Ponzi scheme and whatnot. Okay, and this usually comes near the bottoms. Okay, then we finally have a reaction, which is, a really informative event because it tells us that something is going on and that, at least momentarily, it seems that the sellers that were once in control, they're not anymore in control, and so the asset trends up by at least a considerable amount. And finally, we have the test, and this puts an end to phase A because it fully confirmates that we have a sideways arranging trend. All right. So from that, we go to phase B, which is building the cause. And again, I'm going to repeat myself and say that these events and these phases, they are not just, price patterns that you see in the chart. They have reasons in the real world. And the real interesting part is associating the price movements with events in the real world, with narratives being built and campaigns, being worked on by these large traders, which in Wyckoff theory control the markets. Okay, so what phase B is basically the events of the upthrust action and the signs of weakness and minor sign of weakness, secondary tests, whatnot. Okay, during this phase, the market is in balance. It's when we see the most ranging, right? So this here, for example, would be a good, phase B here. So we are mostly going sideways and the market doesn't move much. So accumulations and distributions, as I say, in basically every single class, they are made so that the large traders, they can, buy for as cheap as possible and sell for as expensive as possible. If they were to buy it all at once and sell all at once, they would create, huge instabilities in the market. And so they use these events to make it a little bit more efficiently. Okay. Now, sometimes, Ruben goes on and on about projections and duration of things. I don't like too much going into that part because that is precisely going after patterns and going after, like candlestick patterns and whatnot. And I think that is the least useful part of the whole Wyckoff theory. Okay. So what we need to think about in phase B is the building of the narrative. Okay. Building of the narrative that Bitcoin is going to go down forever or that it's going to go up forever so that they can maintain the price in the really tight range, even though the supply is really low or the demand is really low. Okay. And so I think this is it. Oh, so if you take just a couple of things home, just take home that every single phase in Wyckoff theory has a motive. We have the first phase, which is phase A, which is stopping this trend and, with high volumes and the specific characteristics that we talked about a little bit earlier. We have the stopping of the trend, and then we have the building the narrative, the ranging to accumulate or distribute. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to sign up for exclusive content and whatnot, sign up at thecryptogarden.io. It was super nice having you. Thank you and goodbye.